Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pathways to Excellence. It's my absolute honor to have with me here Andrew Loh, the 11th Malaysian to earn an MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business, and also the very first Malaysian to earn a special joint degree from Harvard and Stanford as well. Thank you so much for being here, Andrew. It's an absolute honor.
Thank you, Victor. The honor is mine.
Wow. Well, Andrew here read my college essays when I was a mere child back during the age of USApps right here, and has gone on really to inspire a whole lot of people in a whole bunch of different ways right here. For those of you who may have seen somebody who looked a little bit like him right there on the news, so then you may have seen this weird kaya article right here. Andrew here is the founder of a whole bunch of different interesting movements right here, including the Kita Jaga Kita movement. I believe that was something that you initiated during the COVID pandemic. And also, you created the Pulang Mengundi movement right here when you were in university. So then, Andrew, what is it that led you to seek out these incredible educational experiences, and how have they shaped your view of the world?
Yeah, thanks, Victor. So, as part of my professional experience, I've worked across 7 countries in the world, advising governments. So advising heads of state and government, advising ministers on how to make government better. I decided to do a joint degree in policy at Harvard and business at Stanford because I'm interested in leverage to create change. So one of the big debates that people have is like, what is the best way to make an impact in the world? Is it through the state, the public sector? Is it through the private sector, business? Or is it through civil society? So I think it's actually a combination of all three, depending on your skills and strength. But ultimately, you need cooperation and understanding of what each sector brings to the table, what each sector is unique, how their advantages and drawbacks work together in creating change.
Wow. Well, what is it that inspired you to even think about this idea of change in the first place?
Have you ever read like a news article and gotten so angry? So, I'll tell you a story of how my friends and I started Pulang Mengundi, Go Back to Vote, voter mobilization movement. It was when Najib was Prime Minister, so the backdrop of 1MDB stealing all our money, and at the same time, he was going to steal our election. He wanted to have election day on a Wednesday to depress voter turnout, when traditionally our polling day is always on the weekend or weekend adjacent, right? So either Friday to Monday, so people can travel back to their hometowns to vote. But he knew that people were angry, so he wanted to make sure that outstation voters, especially workers who work in Klang Valley and have to travel back to their hometowns to vote, couldn't really do it. So he made polling day on a weekday. So when that happened, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. We were so angry. My friends and I were just like bitching about Najib. Like, how the hell can he do this? Who does he think he is? And at that point, we had a decision to make, right? We could get angry and stay angry, or we could get mad and get even. So we decided to do something. And a lot of what I do, looking back at myself, is how do I take the emotions that I feel, which sometimes it's anger, and translate that into positive action, to actually use that anger to build something tangible and to inspire people to work together to create impact. So that was really the origin story of like how my friends and I, we started Pulang Mengundi.
Wow, okay. And that was, well, sometime during like the 2018 elections, was it not?
That's right.
How does an injustice like that push someone to essentially seek out further education?
When you try to fight against the machine or create change in some ways, I realize that one of the things is that like I am alone, I'm an individual. So my impact as an individual is actually quite small. To create real change, you have to work with a lot of other people. You have to create alliances. You have to make friends, right? Like build stakeholder value, right? Create a coalition, work towards a common goal. And that's what we did when we started Unglangmengudi.com, when we started Kita Jaga Kita. We didn't just do it ourselves. We had to appeal to a wide variety of stakeholders. And Harvard and Stanford was almost a culmination of this realization. I have to work across people to have an impact, to catalyze my personal impact. One, so how do I do that better? And two, how do I make friends with some of the captains of industry and some of the future presidents and prime ministers of the world? Right? Where better to do it than going to school at Harvard and Stanford? So these are some of the realizations that help me towards that journey.
Amazing, cool, thank you. When we think about the journey that you went on right there was a point in time when you were Andrew Loh, not a Harvard student, not a Stanford student. You were, like me, a boy who was living in the Klang Valley right there. You went to SMK Damansara before you eventually went on to college at Swarthmore College right there. Yeah, like would you share a little bit about, well, what you were like as a child and how, I guess, that childhood that you had, right, shaped the way that you think towards where you are today?
I love this question because I love origin stories, right? How did you get where you are? Like, what changed? I love it. And I think it adds a lot of value, especially for your listeners who can relate to people and say, oh, okay, this influenced X person in this way. Maybe I can draw inspiration from there. I'll tell you two stories from my childhood. So one is around debate. So I think debate builds an amazing culture that helps a lot of Malaysian students become better cognitively, intellectually, emotionally. For me, debate, we had a really amazing debate teacher at SMK Damansara. Teachers, actually. So Puan Magdalene Su, who's now in Miri, and Puan Kobe Lian, who is retired. Amazing debate teachers.
Yes.
Not just because they pushed us intellectually, like this is how you do debate. The biggest growth for me was the feedback culture of debate. So after every debate, my coaches and teachers would be like, here's what you did right, here's what you did wrong. 1, 2, 3, here's how we can do better. Wow. Very specific, very pointed. And at first when you're a kid, this hurts because you're not used to hearing criticism about you, right? This is your performance. Yes, tell me good things that I did. Yeah, it made me feel good. But like the bad things are probably the more important parts.
Oh yeah,
right?
Sure.
These are your gaps and this is how you improve. That was the biggest thing I learned from debate. How to take feedback and how to grow. So my teachers instilled that value in me. And we did really well in debate because of that. We were quite successful as a team. And as homage to my teachers, I went back to SMK Damansara to coach debate. So not only did I learn how to take feedback, I learned how to give feedback as well. So in my personal story, this feedback culture from SMK Damansara debate really helped me see the importance of growth as a person, which helped me towards where I am right now at Harvard and Stanford. Second story, and this is almost like a converse. So I went to Form 6 for a few months just to try it out. I was a really confused kid back then. I was like, what do I want to do after this? I went to Form 6 late. And at that specific point in time, there was a specific competition. It was an Olympiad that was organized by a university, a private university. And they invited schools throughout the nation to join. And every school was like supposed to send at maximum 2 teams. Because I joined Form 6 late, I found out it's competition late, and my school had already chosen the participants. And this is not DJ. DJ doesn't have Form 6. It's a different unnamed school in the Klang Valley. So I was like, great, I want to go to this competition, but I don't want to displace people. You've already chosen your teammates. Like, let's see what I can do, right? So is there a creative way to solve this problem? So I called up the university. I was like, hey, for your Olympiad, can I join? My school already has 2 teams. Can I be the 3rd team? And they were like, sure, by all means. So I was like, yes. Then I went to the school administration and I was like, hey, Can I send the third team? I know you sent 2 teams already. Like, they're great. But I will take care of the third team. I already have approval. And they're like, hey, go do whatever you want. So I like corralled some of my friends randomly to train them, and we went in. And lo and behold, we won that competition. We were the third team and we won. And like randomly, and we were really happy. We went back to the school. In DJ, in SMK Damansara, when you win a debate competition, the prizes are yours. It's great. You're like, hey, glory prize. In my new school, they came up to you. They came up to me and was like, great, congratulations for winning. But you know the money? We're going to keep it.
Oh gosh.
And I was like, no. Who do you think you are? What? What?
What?
Wait, how? How is this even possible? Like, what? What brain you? Like, seriously? And they're like, yeah, we're going to keep the money. And I was like, we had this debate. It's like, but we did all the work. And they were like, yeah, but without the school, you wouldn't have represented us. Like, yeah, but like, this is the freaking third team. And
But you literally like call up the university, be all like, hey, I'm going to represent.
exactly.
Wow. And like,
Exactly.
okay, if you remember, like, how much were they trying to take from you at that time?
I don't even remember. I think it was like 1.5K. Split it across like 4 to 5 students. And
Okay,
I was just shocked that this was even happening.
why would they do something like that? That's crazy.
Yeah. I was like, wow. Like, do you have any idea what this impact is on students' morale? Like, why would any student take the initiative to go to a competition, take the time to train for that competition,
Wow.
and win it for you, only for their rewards, to like,
Yeah.
just go back to the school. Like if you want some money, talk to us. We would be very happy to like split it by like 6. So you would the school would get a portion of the money as well, the prize money, right? Like, but it has to come from us. We want the onus of us contributing back to the school has to be from us, right? We have to own this decision, not you take the money and like that's it, end of the discussion. So I don't even remember how we resolved it, whether they took the money or we took the money. But I remember this. I remember how we ended the discussion, which is I went up to them and was like, this is why SMK Damansara Jaya wins all the competitions. And this is why your school doesn't win any competition. Like, this is exactly what school culture, how you structure incentives, whether you feel you're entitled to this or that, and how you make individuals accountable for rewards or punishments.
Yep.
Influences behavior. Like, what are the incentives for future behavior? What are you trying to make? What system are you building?
Wow.
So I was just shocked. I was like, this is why systems matter. The feedback and culture and debate helped push excellence in SMK Damansara Jaya. The rewards and punishments incentives for competitions help push it because people expect and reward excellence. In this unnamed school, it was like, no, I'm just take everything. I was like, okay, take it. Like, this is why. So I quit the school right after, and I was like, yeah, great. Like, this is why we'll win all the competitions, and you probably win. You're better than SMK Damansara Jaya in one way. Your toilets are much cleaner. Very, very clean toilets. Very clean.
Wow. And you know, it's fascinating because have you ever heard this quote before, Andrew? The quote by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. True terror is waking up one morning and finding out that your high school class is running the country. I'm not sure if you've heard that before, but
Well, I would love that. I would love my high school class to run the country. High school class is great.
whoa, your high school class at SMK Damansara Jaya?
Yeah, tell us.
Wow.
Tell us.
Oh my gosh. I have a grudging respect right here for your school. Like, and credit needs to be given where it is given, right? Like, they graduated you. They graduated also Peter Yong from Mr. Money TV. They graduated Kylie Ng from 500 Startups. But what if somebody were to say to you, but you are living in a privileged part of the Klang Valley. You essentially are in the urban center of Kuala Lumpur. Of course you should succeed. You're all from well-to-do families. There's no reason why you should be proud of that. How you respond to that?
I think that's a very legit counter. I love it. I want to take it and push it, right? Take that as a yes, which is more privileged people with more economic resources, are expected to perform better. Yes, in general.
Yes.
But let's take the Klang Valley as a whole.
Yes.
Let's take all the catchment areas of rich-ish people. Let's see where they send the kids to school. Let's actually take the immediate PJ area. There's SMK Damansara, SMK Damansara Utama,
Yes.
and various other schools, and many, many other schools. Why are some schools outperforming other schools, given their catchment area is basically the same?
Wow.
Right? So I think we take that, but to push it, we need to look at the same students, put them in different schools with different systems, different incentives, different cultures, how you train, how you reward your attitude towards excellence, and ask yourself the question: does it really not matter? So I think the answer is actually it does matter, right? Even if you have the resources at home, with the right systems and culture, you can push our students to become better.
Wow.
I put it to you, right? Kylie, Peter, Darren Ong, who is a professor at one of our universities and who is the bronze medalist at IMO, the Math Olympiad for the longest time. Right? My classmates, amazing people.
And so that features quite beautifully into this idea, right? Classroom as microcosm for the nation right
Yeah.
here. In what ways do you feel maybe that your time, right, at SMK Damansara Jaya, what way do you feel that it was shaping you? Maybe you could speak a little bit more about like what you feel were the sorts of incentives, reward systems that you were facing like in that school at the time.
I think there are two big things that stand out for me, two themes. One is this idea of one is competition culture. Competition culture, as in like competitions are important and helpful to filter out excellence, to provide a system of rewards to recognize achievers. So internally, we had like internal debate competitions to choose representatives to the national debate competition, for example. Right? Those things came with prestige. You had glory if you did it, and a system of support where you had really great teachers who trained you to it. So like that part was helpful to understand that like your achievement is in many ways a function of the system to support you, what you choose to do, a system that supports you, and then your own individual choices in that system, right? Oh, with this system, do I train? How do I react to feedback? So that's one, competition culture. And two is around friendship. And this has been a reflection more towards the later end of my life than that. Like all I care about right now is like you have to fucking win the competition, right? Just win. But now it's really about the friends that I developed through the competitions. So Nick, for example, Nick Kaur, he was a real reason why I applied to Harvard, because he was Nick Kaur. As a kid, you're like, okay, Harvard, great, I want to go there. When you have a person who's done it, a person who's very similar to you, who's done it, because Nick went to SME Damansara Utama, so you could see that pathway for you. The pathway becomes real and tangible.
Yes.
You could see yourself in there. When I wanted to go to Harvard, or I had this idea, I reached out to Nick. I was like, hey, Nick, I'm thinking of applying. And he was like, oh my God, you should definitely do it. Do you need any help? Here are my here are points, let's talk. And it almost seemed that Nick was more confident of me going to Harvard than I was confident myself. And it was such a mark of respect that it built my confidence to apply. If you look at the other competitions that I've been to, there was a final competition for like a national essay writing thing, and a couple of my really, really good friends were ultimately in that final dinner, and we only understood this a couple of years after the fact. So using competitions as a way of building friendships with people you would not meet in any other platform, and using those friendships to do stuff, to create change, to work on initiatives, I think that's invaluable. So for me, that was my school experience that I thought DJ made a great point of emphasis.
Wonderful. Well, before you went on that journey really to even apply to Harvard in the first place, so you went on to Swarthmore College, and that is a liberal arts college.
Yeah.
What led you to apply to SWAT in the first place and to take part in, well, a range of different very interesting activities such as learning Arabic? I believe that you learned Arabic like while you were in school, if I'm not wrong. So like, what led you to choose that right there? Because like you did say that, oh, maybe you need a role model to apply to, for example, Harvard. But then that was something that you did later on in grad school. So then, what was it that made it so you didn't try for it earlier?
Oh yeah, I tried. I was rejected. Undergrad rejected. So Swarthmore gave me money, so I went. So I'm like, okay, great. Nothing there.
Okay.
Also, like I guess in America, as you know, but for our listeners, like in America, when you apply to colleges and universities for bachelors, you don't have to decide on your own major. You can be undecided. And as a person who's perpetually undecided, I was like, I don't know what I want to study. Like, do I want to study law? Do I want to study accounting? Like, give me more time to decide because like we've done science all throughout our secondary school. Like I deserve some time to explore the world before deciding to major in something. So that was the reason I chose to apply to the US. Why Swarthmore in the US? It gave me money.
I see. Okay. So, as we recall, when you were on the verge of applying to Harvard and Stanford, so then that was just after the elections, if I'm not wrong, right? Or was it like around that time period?
It was right after.
Right after the time period. Wow. That's so fascinating to me, and because I can just imagine the variety of things that were going on inside your mind at that time. Do you remember the kinds of things that you were thinking about as you were writing your applications during that time, and what even led you to consider, well, a joint degree with Harvard and Stanford in the first place?
Yeah, going back to I think the first response to your question is how do you best create change? So you need to work across a wide variety of stakeholders, and that takes a lot of skills. Imagine your skills as a toolbox, right? You need skills to make friends. You need skills to influence and change people's minds, to convince people. You need some of the technical skills. Your math and stats have to be good. You have to understand policy. So having that in mind, I thought to set myself best to create change in the future, it was the right time and right place to develop this toolbox and to make friends to create change.
Wow, okay. Then what led you on the idea of doing a joint degree in the first place?
So change, a theory change of multi-sectoral change, right? So you need the public sector, private sector, and civil society.
Right.
I thought this specific degree was the best of both worlds.
I see.
Right? Like you get training in terms of policy, and you need training in terms of understanding the private sector. What is profit and loss? What is profit incentive? What are all these things? What do businesses care about? Right? What's the impact of taxes on regulation on private business? Which is largely the engine of growth that has powered our world and society towards a huge decrease in poverty, a huge decrease in babies dying, right? Maternal mortality. So understanding these few engines of change and speaking the language of people within it usually helpful for a future.
Wow. Thank you for that. What was it like for you then, actually transitioning to that environment? Well, you dreamt of it for quite a long while, and then suddenly, then there you were, on the precipice of a dream as yet unfulfilled. How did you feel like when you first got there, and what was your experience like?
It was great. It was right. What a beautiful, beautiful experience. I think Harvard and Stanford are magic. So if any of you are thinking of applying, whether it's for undergrad or graduate degrees, like please apply. Because when I was at the precipice, I had a decision to make, right? Do I apply? Do I not apply? And the framework that came to mind for me was, what will I regret most? in 40 years' time, in 50 years' time, like let's zoom all the way down. If you're gonna die already, would you regret applying and maybe getting in, maybe not getting in? Or would you regret not applying? Which would you regret more? And at that point in time, I was like, oh, it's so clear. It was a flash of clarity. It was like, I would definitely regret it if I don't apply. Because if I don't apply, my probability of getting in is 0%. If I do apply, at least I tried, right? And the probability is a non-zero, it's a positive factor, right? So having that, if you look at research, psychological research, and about seniors who are on the verge of like dying, or old people in general, and you ask them, what do you regret most in life? Psychologists have found that most of them regret not doing things versus doing things, right? Like regrets of omission versus regrets of commission, right? Most of them say regret not doing things more than doing things.
I see.
Because you're in trouble.
Wow.
So I wanted to avoid that.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating. Well, what were some things that you found most fascinating about the experience that you ended up having? And also, like, how does that work logistically?
Yeah.
Because, like, Harvard is on the East Coast and
Yeah.
Stanford is on the West Coast, kind of thing. So, like, was one of the things that you learned in school, like, the ability to clone yourself so that you can, like, take flights, like, here,
I
there,
wish.
everywhere. Then, like, you study here and study there, kind of thing. You have parallel processing right now. Is that what you learned at Harvard Stanford?
I wish. Basically, for this joint degree, it's 3 years.
Yeah.
And if you do the degree separately, it's 2 years plus 2 years. For a joint degree, you choose where you want it to start, and then you have a choice of structuring it. So for me, I went to Harvard for the first year, Stanford second year, and third year was half and half. So it's logistically doable, but condensed. But you asked about lessons, right? Asked about lessons. Couple of really interesting lessons that I thought I would not have learned otherwise. I'll give you some examples. So one is humor, the use of humor, both in your personal life and professional life. So I'm kind of a chill guy, very casual. I don't believe in humor and things. When I was working as a government consultant, one of the feedback that I got was that, Andrew, you shouldn't crack so many jokes because it makes you look younger than you already are. So I thought it was good advice at that time, because I was working in countries where like the amount of gravitas, the amount of influence you have on people was directly correlated with how much gray hair you have.
Yeah. And so people even like try to dye their hair gray so that they can be taken more seriously, right?
It's so ridiculous, right? I'm like, why? I went to Stanford. There's a class called Humor in Business.
Wow.
And it completely changed my mind.
Oh, that's class. Okay.
That was a big class.
Fascinating.
And my professor was like, oh, dude, Andrew, you're really funny. And this is a big strength of yours. You won a competition in Stanford. There's a competition for all the first years. They give you a business case, and you're supposed to like present to like a board. And you're supposed to like defend decisions, they ask questions. And I won it because I used humor. I cracked jokes, like without realizing it. And they're like, holy shit, this is hilarious, you win. And that is a strength that you shouldn't underplay, because it shows authenticity. People like you as a person. And with humor, you are able to elicit some truths in ways that are received better. Sometimes when you want to make a comment or change people's minds, instead of just attacking directly, use humor. You can be like, everyone laughed at it, but like sometimes the message gets across and it's like, oh, the real message is like, I need to change this, or like there's a problem with this decision. So like, there are ways of using humor that are great for business. You should play on those strengths. When I heard this, I was like, oh, this is the first time anyone told me this. I was like, this is really interesting, because not just my professors tell me this, my classmates, who are future CEOs, who are future presidents and prime ministers, tell me this as well. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe there's something there. And the other argument is like, bro, you've gotten Harvard and Stanford, right? Like you've already set yourself up in terms of confidence. People know you have your shit down. You have the skills. to do work, and to show some levity sets yourself apart. You're like, oh, this guy has a life as well. He's fun to be with, but you can't just do the work, but also it's fun to be with.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
humor. Other things are things like asking for what you want. Hugely important, right?
And for context, for everyone here, so like Andrew, well, brought us over here to this cafe. There could have been an alternate reality where Play Clip. We had done this interview in a completely different place right here. So Ben is living out his lessons right here. But like this bum, man, like this, wow, living out those lessons. But yeah,
Thank you. And Victor as well, right? He's asking for an interview. So it was like exactly what I want.
whoa.
It's great. And I think we should do more of this. Because by doing this and having this exchange, often we come to an outcome that is better, more optimal than the status quo, right? Like if let's say you had a need and you don't voice it out, which is what a lot of Malaysians do. You're like, okay lah, you just go out and get it. People don't know that you want something done. People don't know that there's a way that maybe there's something that this person can do, which doesn't cost them anything, but has a huge benefit for you, right? So like, let's say the cost of this person is this way, but both of you benefit. Theoretically, more people should ask what they want because that's how we help each other.
Wow.
One, psychologically as well. When we think of doing this, a lot of us like segan malu, we don't want to do this. What if this person say no? What if this person takes it as an insult? But researchers found that like when you make experiments, you ask like the general populace, if you ask a random person for help, how many of them will say yes versus no? General populace says actually very few people will say yes because like why would they help a random person like you? But when you actually carry out the experiment, a majority of people actually help because people want to help. People want to be helpful. It is in our nature as humans to do it, right? So I think that's really the best way of approaching it. Voice out what you need to, at best, if that outcome leads to wins on both sides, growing the pie, because that's how we as a society.
Wow. Ask and ye shall receive. Wow.
Right, very good.
Wonderful. So then, now I'd like to ask maybe a bit of a controversial question right here. Within 5 seconds, please respond.
Okay.
Harvard and Stanford, which do you prefer?
Stanford.
I'm sorry. Would you mind standing up for a quick bit and then like have it here for a quick bit? Okay, just because you asked, right? I'll do it. Okay. Harvard. This is almost like that meme where basically like you have the guy like just being pulled right there, and then he's like staring. Why Stanford?
I didn't bring my Stanford shirt back, so I was like,
okay. Well, let me ask a different question then. In addition to the one that I asked earlier, but which of these universities do you feel had maybe a larger overall impact upon your life? If that's a question that you can answer.
sure. Stanford. Like, case in point, like if you get to any of these universities, they're all amazing universities, right? We're talking
Yes.
about like the smallest amounts of differences.
Yes.
One, two, it's apples and oranges, not totally comparable, right? Like I went to Stanford for business school.
Yes.
I went to Harvard for policy school. They're
Yeah.
very different things.
Yeah.
In business school, you make friends.
Mhm.
You make a lot of friends. You build your network. What I felt was more important was not so much the classes on hard skills, the technical skills, classes on soft skills. How do you talk to people? How do you influence people who actually don't like you or hate you? How do you turn the temperature down or raise the temperature to get results?
Yeah.
I had a lot of training at Stanford Business School, GSB, so the Stanford Graduate School of Business. We call it the GSB, and the GSB is I think its expertise is in all these soft skills courses.
Right.
One of the most famous classes at Stanford is this class called Touchy Feeling. Just Touchy Feeling. You sit around in a circle and you talk about feelings for 4 hours per week. And it's amazing, right? Like, part of it is, how do I actually come across to people? How do people come across to me?
Yes.
So one is like, you learn how to label feelings. Am I feeling disgust when you say that? Do I feel ridiculous? Do you make me feel small? Do I make you feel small? And then you get the feedback, because people are made to like tell you, when you do this, this is how I feel. Like, okay. So you get exposed to a wide variety of like people who are honest and give you like feedback that this is how I come across to other people. Let me play with different styles. What if I do it this way? Do you feel the same way? What if I do it the other way? What if I turn it up? So you get all these real-time feedback about how you come across. And it's invaluable because not many people will tell you all these things. You know it, and you get the power and understanding and awareness of that. And you play with it and get experience to hopefully apply it in other situations in the future, right? Whether you talk to a board of directors at your startup, if you're presenting to the cabinet of a government, these are ways that you can leverage your school experience in very practical future application.
Thank you for that. You know, that's so fascinating because when people think about, for example, a fancy school, right? So often people talk about like what you know, for example. So like oftentimes school or university is thought of as a very like hard knowledge, like this is what I know, and this is what my certification says that I should know, hence I will tell it to you kind of thing right there. But you, in your explanation to me, you're telling me about like those soft skills right there. So just like kind of throwing it out there, but on the whole,
Yeah.
you know, if you were to, and this is like again a controversial question right here. You talk about learning of soft skills when you were in university, right? What if we took you out of the university, or we had the universe timeline split apart, and there was a reality where basically you had gone on to Harvard and Stanford and learned those soft skills, and then another reality where you had not done that, but you had still learned those soft skills as well. Like, how do you think that that will play out?
Let me answer it this way, right? There's this saying. It's quite simplistic, but I think it really, there's a truth in it. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right. A lot of people are like, fuck this, right? You know, like, you're saying this, but like, do you actually care about me? Like, is what you're saying, does it make sense? Are you here to like insult me? If you propose a solution, you propose a suggestion, or do they take it, actually, he actually knows my interests, and he's not pointing out my weakness to like make me feel small. He's actually trying to make me better. Right? Showing that you care before showing how much you know is really the way it is, right? How many times have we met people who like the first thing you drop is like, oh, I went to Harvard, I went to Stanford, and like, okay, douchebag, right? Like, why would you say that? Like, what does that have to do with me? But knowing people who actually give a shit about you lends yourself credibility and trust before you try to shake things up. So I think that's immensely powerful, and that's something that is a really, really important learning for a lot of us, I feel.
Oh, fascinating. Thank you for that. When we think about, well, the things that you did right there, so a lot of those things, they have to do with Malaysia. And here we have this idea of like cultural representation. You talk about Malaysia when you deliver, well, a lecture as part of like a conversation series at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. You spoke about anger, you spoke about 1MDB, and that eventually continued along the way when you eventually graduated from Harvard and Stanford, and you appeared in Paju Melayu when you were featured on Weird Gaya, if I'm not wrong. But so, tell me a little bit more about this care. why do you care for Malaysia, and why is it that this has continued throughout your time, your education with kita jaga kita, pulang mengundi, and so on and so forth?
I think that's a great question. I think it's a core of a lot of what me and my friends do. I think at the core of it is you really love.
I mean,
We love Malaysia. We are so proud to be Malaysians. One of the biggest learnings from Harvard and Stanford for me was representation. If you don't tell your stories, who will tell them? And it's very, very important for us as Malaysians because, again, we tend to be more passive. We're like segan silu, right? We don't talk about stuff. Like, why are you bragging? Da, 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 da. Like, zoom out, right? Like, when people share things about you, do you feel annoyed or do you feel like you're posting? For me, when I read about things that happen on Facebook, Instagram, on LinkedIn, I love it because, oh, this is what my friend is doing. This is so cool. And I love it because it educates me and gives me richness and understanding in their lives. So this came about in a few ways at school. One was wearing baju Melayu to graduation at Harvard and Stanford. I was very proud to do that because it was a representation of cultural identity, not just talking about it, but like showing. So I wore baju Melayu. It was great. My friends loved it, and it struck a chord with Malaysians. It went viral. There was a vast media coverage here. I went on, I think, Malaysia Hari Ini as well, so on TV. And I think it struck a chord because it was this almost surprise of an ethnic Chinese Malaysian Chinese. Why would he wear baju Melayu, national costume for graduation? Because I wore it because I'm proud to be Malaysian, and I want to tell this story to my classmates who are going to be future amazing people and to the world. So I thought it was really important to represent this, and it struck a chord. So I think that was the right choice. One, I would love to see more Malaysians do it, right? I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to educate. This is my national dress. Look at this. I'll tell you another story. At Stanford, in accounting class, we had an assignment to write about a scandal or some fraud and talk about it, just write about it. So I chose, of course, to write about 1MDB.
Here it is.
So it was very colorful. There was a lot of F words because I was so angry. My prime minister stole 4.5 billion US dollars from my country. This is fraud. And some of the details quite hilarious, right? So 1MDB borrowed money basically from a Emirati company called Abar.
Yes.
And instead of paying back Abar, UAE, they paid a company called Abar Seychelles and Abar BVI, British Virgin Islands, which are money laundering companies set up elsewhere, and paid them. And these were set up by the CEO, the head and number one and number two of Abar. So, like, holy crap, these are hilarious things that should never have worked, but it actually happened. So I'm like, let's talk about this, because it is important for my classmates to know that this affects me personally and has been a big reason of why I do things I do, and how important this is as it happens to Malaysia, to my country. This is the biggest kleptocracy, biggest fraud that has ever happened, quote unquote, the Department of Justice, USA, right? So I was like, okay, let's talk about this. Angry, F word, F word, F word. My professor wrote back, he was like, oh, this is a very colorful piece. Would you like to present to class? So I was basically invited to be the first student speaker in accounting class. And I presented the class, and they loved it. They're like, so funny, but also like educational. Wow. There are people from Goldman Sachs who worked at Goldman Sachs here, and they understood what these meant for Goldman Sachs to have lax controls to a developing country like Malaysia. Like, corruption happens. So hopefully it changes the way they carry business when they become big decision makers in the future, right? It also, I felt, helped educate the rest of my classmates who didn't know anything about Malaysia and maybe knew something about 1MDB, but like connecting the dots through my representation hopefully helps them change the way they think about corruption and government in the future.
For sure, yeah. And like it's fascinating that you talk about highlighting as well because like in some ways, I mean like that story was one that was almost stranger than fiction. Like who would have thought that The Wolf of Wall Street would be funded by something that was very much Wolf of Wall Street like in that way right there.
Yeah,
Very
yeah. And going back to impact, right? At that point, I had a decision. Do I write about 1MDB? Do I take something safer and not write about this? And in this case, it could be safe. Nothing happened. Fine. I get this B or C or A in my homework. But I chose to write about 1MDB. And as a result of that choice to deliberately represent my country, I was able to, I was given the opportunity to talk to people, to tell them our story as Malaysians. And we are richer and better as a result. So I push all of us to think about ways that when we talk to different audiences, especially to a foreign audience, what are the stories that we tell? Or like when I talk to Malaysian students, what are stories I tell them? What are relevant things that may or may not spark curiosity, change their mind, change their behavior on XYZ.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. When you look forward and into the future, so I understand that you were just working at like the Tony Blair Institute for quite a long while, right? So then, well, after so long of like advising, I guess, leaders, heads of state, and so on and so forth right there, I guess, would you say that there are some fundamental lessons that you feel that heads of state around the world should potentially take into consideration as they move forward into an arguably very volatile world?
I think high level, the answer is yes. In terms of specifics, every country is different and every leader faces different challenges. One of the things in common I think leaders all face is prioritization. Some things are more important than others. Leaders, when you get elected, you tend to promise everything: the sun, the moon, the stars, everything. I want to do everything to help our country do X, Y, Z. Your time as a leader is limited. You have 24 hours in a day. You have only so much resources financially, and also in terms of human resources, your people, your cabinet ministers, your staff. How best do you use all these resources to create change? And I put it to you that like the more you focus down on the most important things, whether it is education, whether it is infrastructure, right? Focusing down will really help you deliver outsized results than just like spraying and praying, doing everything.
Thank you for that. The reason I asked that question after, well, you had told me a little bit about your decision to talk about 1MDB is that we're currently right now in Malaysia, and mysteriously enough, you are here by an act of volition. A lot of people essentially, well, they might essentially choose to disappear or like go off, depart for another set of shores. Yet somehow or another, like you are here at the moment. And that's a blessing. And I'd like to know your thoughts, right, on the current administration, how you might advise them if you were to, well, tell them to prioritize for a certain set of things. When you look at Malaysia right now, in its current state, what do you feel are some things that its leaders should prioritize for the days ahead?
I think one thing is to change the way we look and talk about brain drain. My hot take, slightly controversial, is that brain drain doesn't really exist. We should think about brain circulation instead. When we talk about highly skilled people moving out of the country, a lot of times in Malaysia we're like, oh, we need them to come back to contribute. But this thing can be a virtuous cycle on aggregate. As a whole, if we look at it, one, if we look at the skills that you get, There are jobs and professional opportunities in other countries that don't exist in Malaysia. So if you want to work at the forefront of AI, you want to work at the forefront of tech, right? They don't exist in Malaysia, right? When you send your people to pursue excellence over there, allow people to just do it. One, you develop your human potential, but also there's brain circulation. So one of the great case studies is India and the US, right? Most of the highly skilled individuals in the US are from India, especially in the tech world. And look at how much it has impacted both the startup ecosystem and the tech world in India. A lot of them have these linkages, right? When you leave your home country, you don't leave it forever. You have ties. There's networks, business networks, intellectual networks. You go back to contribute, whether it's your money, your time, your training. You set up companies in your own country. And there are huge brain circulation effects that are not so well understood. One. Two is the impact of incentives on individuals in more developing countries, for example. There's a study about Fiji and what is the impact on immigration, external immigration on skilled migrants. They found that people actually choose, when you give them a path to immigrate outside for more skilled opportunities, people choose to train better. People choose higher education more at the margin. People choose to work harder at their jobs because there's a pathway out for social mobility. So I think in general, brain circulation is really a better assessment of this situation rather than brain drain. Having said all of this, right, the government has to make a lot of changes, I feel, to our education system, to the way we treat ourselves as citizens equally, without fear or favor. The way we build our infrastructure to emphasize public spaces or not. So a lot of things that we can do. But one of the things I would ask us to do is think about the ways that, look at us, for example, right? When we have a choice to go to top universities in the world, we try harder. We try so hard. We work, and that that has such an impact on an individual basis, and it's important to have that incentive there.
Thank you so much for that. And to kind of add on to that, well, here I see your expertise not just from the governmental point of view, but also in a more holistic sense. Drawing upon your experience in business school, advising governments, and also your learnings from Harvard and Stanford, in what ways do you feel that perhaps Malaysia's administration or business community should work together to create a better future for Malaysia?
I think one of the ways that we can random things is I think something Nick Kaw mentioned in your interview, which is this idea of experimenting. So in business, for example, when you want to launch a product or when you do something, you pilot it out, you test it out. Does this new thing have enough demand? Do people like my thing? Can I sell it for this price or this price or this price? Right? When I do an ad, what format should it be? Which channel? So you test it out before you actually launch it. Why? One of the next things, answers to your question for this is experimenting, piloting, playing with different things and testing them out. And its conception of where we are right now is that we're a fundamentally conservative society, but he would like to see more playing, more experimentation. 100% believing in this, right? Taking this kind of entrepreneurial spirit in business and putting it in government. Playing with what is the best way to teach our kids math. What is the best way to really upskill their language proficiency in English and Malay. Are there ways to link skill development between universities and companies that create a straighter pathway from school to work? Right? Different things like this. Having this spirit of playing, of adventure, of experimenting, I think it can be hugely beneficial to us as a country. If you look at Indonesia, for example, right? Their Minister of Education is Nadim. He's the
Yeah.
exactly. He's the CEO of this tech firm, and in a way he takes that spirit of playing and experimenting into government, and I think they're doing very well. We need more of this. We need the testing the waters, pushing things to create systems that work for us. So playing with things and actually anchoring the right results, anchoring on things that matter. Right? What are the results that matter in this? It's not really saving people's face or making people feel good. It's making sure our kids can are educated, have the skills to function in a modern society.
Thank you for that. How confident are you that Malaysia can accomplish these things, and how would you drive things forward if you were, not to say the prime minister of the country, but essentially you were in control, right, of the steering wheel, and you could actually push forward any initiative that you want? How would you make sure that all of the things that you mentioned, the spirit of experimentation, and various other things along the way, would come into practice?
Yeah, great question. I don't have a complete answer to this, but like a few things here and there. So I think first of all is so tactic and strategy, right? So tactically, I would, if I were prime minister, I would create a cabinet of people who have the same kind of spirit with me, right? Putting them in places of power. So having a minister of education who will play. There are reforms that we can do to empower this spirit. So, for example, our education, our electoral system, is hugely malapportioned. It's not proportional, right? So, if you look at our the members of parliament, we have 222 of them, and they are divided by state. So each state and each constituency, the number of voters electing the MP is different. In the biggest constituency is more than 200k, right? So that 200k voters elect one member of parliament, Bangi, and the smallest one, Igan in Sarawak, is about 20k.
I see.
Right? So the proportion is 10 to 1 in terms of voters to members of parliament. And when you zoom out and look at it as a whole, who is most disproportionately almost punished in this case is the urban voters in Selangor, in KL, because you have less MPs per population. There are various historical reasons for this, but an impact from this is that the traditional sources of political support for playing, for a spirit of entrepreneurship, you just empower them. Because with I would have a more proportionate and fairer electoral system, have a more equal voter base for each member of parliament to empower voices for reform and change.
Cool. Thank you for that. Also, shout out to Dr. Ong and Sharit San for managing the constituency with the largest number of voters. I actually didn't know that, but yeah, thank you for sharing that along the way. So then, kind of moving along with that then. Now, you mentioned Nick as a very strong role model for you. And I'd like to kind of draw from that into the idea of what you consider, well, a good role model.
Yeah.
Because like you did mention also that, well, you watch this channel, you've seen, well, some of the stories and like managed to get like some richness out of that right there. And take what it is that one may, from meeting different people out there, and I guess like the sheer variety of different individuals that we can get right there. But what is a good role model?
I'll answer in a slightly different, slightly adjacent way, which is, the question is, how do you make people change behavior? How do you actually change the behavior on an individual level? And for me, one of the biggest levers is this role model. When we look at kids, right? Why do kids do what they do? Why do they say this? Why do they say this specific phrase? Why not this phrase? It's because they heard it from their parents, heard it from their friends, heard it from their siblings, right? But when you learn this, you see it and you do. Yeah, fundamentally social creatures. This is why role modeling is so important. When you want, if you're a parent and you're trying to get kids to eat vegetable, you don't tell them eat your vegetables, eat your vegetables. You eat it and say, oh my god, this is so delicious. And they're like, the kids are so curious and eat with you. Same for reading, right? Like, if you want your kids who are readers, you don't say read, and then you play your phone. You read with them. You show them you enjoy reading on your free time. And they pick up habit as well. Role modeling is the #1 lever of behavioral change on an individual level. So seeing is doing. Now, for something that represented this aspect we spoke about, I think for some people it is Mahathir, for example. Right? Mahathir is the first prime minister who is not from the aristocratic class, right? Tunku Abdul Rahman from the royal family of Kedah, right? Tun Razak, Pahang, Tun Hussein on Johor, right? Mahathir is the first person who is from the Marhain, the rakyat jelata, from the masses. When you have that, it's like, oh my god, as a Malaysian, I can see myself in a prime minister position. It was hugely transformative for a lot of individuals. Having role models, both from a immediate family way for kids, but also on a governmental big stage level, changes our choices in ways that are very, very mindful. If that makes sense.
Fascinating. Thank you for that. And here, my penultimate question. Thinking back on the life that you've led so far, who you were from childhood leading up to your education, the different steps of the journey along the way, you have become a person that a lot of people look to as an icon of respect. And thank you also for your personal assistance on my journey. It's been a tremendous honor as well. Thanks. What kind of role model would you like to be for the world in the days ahead?
I think for me, having a few people decide to be better, to be more ambitious. If you're on the verge of saying, Harvard, Stanford, so hard to apply, so hard to probably won't get in. If you hear all these stories and I change your mind and just decide to do it because you might regret it. You never know. I think that's enough for me, right? If you hear this interview and I change my behavior by actually working hard and working harder to get to a certain, whether it's intellectual, professional, social goal, that's enough for me. So just do something, try things. When you're facing a big decision, using the regret minimization framework. Would I regret not doing this? If yes, do it. What do you have to lose? I think that's really enough.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And now the final question. Are there any thoughts, ideas, projects, hopes, aspirations that you'd like to share with the audience at large?
No, not really. But so just so you know, Najib Razak has his comeback motto called Malu Apa Bosku.
Yes.
So I'm the proud owner of maluapabosku.com because his team forgot to renew the website. So my friends and I recreated a website, and it's great. It's a way of using humor to reclaim what is important to us, which is Najib is a bad guy. He should be in jail. I'm glad he's in jail. He's been in jail for a long time.
All right, cool. Thank you, Andrew. It was an amazing interview. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Victor.
And all there.
If you guys are making a decision, just do it. Don't regret stuff. Just do it. Turn your anger, emotions that you feel when you have things, into something powerful. Make friends and create change.
Amazing. Yes. All right. Cheers. Thank you.
Should I come over?
So I'm here with Andrew Loh right here, who has graduated from both Harvard and Stanford right here. From Harvard with a degree in public policy. It's an MPA, right? If I'm not wrong.
Sorry.
MPA, right?
MPA.
MPA, yes. And from Stanford Graduate School of Business in business, yeah, MBA, if I'm not wrong. So, question right here. Andrew, do you want to take over the world?
No, it's okay. I'm too lazy.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
Were you expecting that? You want a different answer? You get a different answer.
Okay, fine. All right, cool.
What do you want me to say?
I mean, you're the one who has like the degree, so like you can say whatever you want. Yeah. So like, 3, 2, 1. Andrew, would you like to take over the world?
Yes, let's do it. I'm building my team. Join me.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. All right.